Well, hello there, friends. Welcome. You are live with Trans Northland. Thanks so much for joining us here on this kind of gray Wednesday. But I'm so excited to be back with you and to welcome in our next guest star. But before I do that, I should tell you who I am. My name is Sean, and I use he, him, and his pronouns. And I'm a co-founder and executive director here at Trans Northland. And I'm so pumped to welcome our guest to the stage. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly, guest star?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, good people. My name's Kathy. I use she, they pronouns, and I work at Harm Reduction Sisters these days.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I know so many folks have been excited about this conversation and getting to hear from you, Kathy. And for those who don't know Kathy, I'm just really excited and honored to be able to introduce you to them. And so for some of you who've maybe been tuning in with us, one of the first things we like to start off with is our Gender Joy segment. And so yeah, Kathy, can you share a story of, something recently that you experienced where you felt really that kind of deep gender euphoria or joy or, whatever word fits best for you? We'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'll share a very specific thing and then kind of a more general vibey thing. Specific thing is this past Sunday at Continental Ski, there was a gender-inclusive bike shop night for femme, trans, women, non-binary, two-spirit, gender-expansive folks. It was great. It felt safe to be authentic. It felt safe to ask any level of questions about bikes and stuff like that. So that was a great way to kind of wrap up a weekend and roll into the week. And there was a band there called the Rocking Rodents. Oh, you gotta like that too.
I've heard of this band. Yes.
And then kind of a more general offering, and maybe I'll tip euphoria a little bit. Typically, when you think about euphoria, you think about the presence of something, namely the presence of affirmation for how you make your way in the world. And as I've gotten older, for me, I'd say sometimes the absence of gender cueing feels really good. So to be gender oblivious is kind of gender euphoric. And I'd say that when I'm gender oblivious, I don't think about what other people are going to think. I just put my elder queer yard garb on and go wander around in my yard and gardens and just pass time and improve my mental health from the trials and tribulations of the day, and not think about gender cues at all, and therefore not think about what other people might be thinking. And sad to say, my yard and the nearby spaces feel safe because generally I'm there alone, or there's people who I know really well, and they're not going to side eye me up for being all elder queered up in my yard. And if I leave and go elsewhere and I still have the yard garb on, a lot of times, I lose that oblivion because I start noticing other people perhaps noticing me, or I start thinking about safety, or I think about, do I need to code switch in any way or not? So gender oblivion as gender joy.
I love that, Kathy. And I've never heard that, like those two words together, gender oblivious. Like, that is so cool. And thank you for sharing. I feel like for myself and our viewers, thanks for those of you, 5 of you watching right now. I love that. And it's almost like gender's like this social construct that humans create to like box us in when we don't need any of those boxes.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
Why get trapped by a construct?
that's
But
right.
but we know we are. So
We are. Yeah, as one of my old bosses used to say, it's sort of the air we breathe, these systems of oppression and white supremacy and all of it, right? It is our norm, but I'm very glad that there's folks like you and myself and so many who are working to really break down those constructs. Um, and so I guess for me, mine's a pretty obvious gender joy euphoria moment that I just thought of. Just last night, I happened to be scrolling on Facebook and one of my like memory thing, a photo popped up from, gosh, like, I don't know, maybe 8-ish years ago, something like that. And it was like one of those things I had shared where it was like, here's this older picture of me and here's this newer one. And sort of, as many of us, I think maybe a lot of binary trans folks, like we love to be able to look back and like see how our transition has, taken place in our lives and how it shows up in our face and our bodies. And it just was a really cool moment of, um, just remembering back in my early days of coming out as trans and just feeling like all of this feels so impossible. Like I want to be where that trans guy is 10 years on T. And now like I am 10 years on T. And so it's a very weird and like goosebump deriving thing for me to be able to kind of reflect. And also just I was sharing with my partner that I just feel like I'm the meest me I've ever been in my entire life. And that feels so good. And I hope you could say the same for yourself, Kathy, the meest or the youest you.
getting closer.
I love that. And also just to pull out, so I think I did hear you say elder. And I remember when you and I sort of first were connecting and you were using the term melder, I think, like folks sort of in the middle there. Would you say you've like crossed into that elder territory? I'm so curious.
Well, I think, everyone's got different standards they look to for claiming elder status, but I think by personal standard and traditional social security related standards, yes, on all counts.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I was just talking with a younger queer person about how, we don't have a lot of elders in our communities who are, out and visible. And of course, we lost so many back in the 80s to the AIDS epidemic. And so I feel very grateful for folks like you, who have been doing this community work for a long time. Which we're going to get into. We'll get into, but I'm going to transition us into our event little mention time. So for folks who don't know, and for those who do, we have our Trans Day of Remembrance event happening tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. And it's going to be kind of what we've done for many, many years and what Kathy and folks have done. So it'll be a candlelight vigil, and we're telling folks it's outdoors. We're going to be on the corner of Lake Avenue and Superior Street, kind of diagonally across from Pizza Luce. And yeah, wear your layers and your winter hats and boots and come stand with us and support our community on this hard day. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that with you, Kathy, because as many folks know, you have a long history of being a big part of making that vigil happen every year. And so there will be some baked treats from the Lock Cafe and Games, and Duluth Coffee Company has also donated some warm beverages for folks. So come on down for that. And I don't know the details, but there is an event happening up at UMD tomorrow night as well. And so you can check the QASU social medias for details about that. It may actually even be on our events calendar, which is right down below us now. So you can see that link. And so our events calendar has all of our stuff we do as Trans Northland, but we like to grab every other LGBT plus event that's happening out there and add it, because we know we're not the only source of queer and trans community building, and there's lots of different ways to get involved. And then, so speaking of community, I also want to mention this coming Saturday is the 2025 Hot Dish Bake Off with some amazing folks. And I know I copied and pasted this, but they say every year Minnesotans gather to eat homemade hot dishes and celebrate equitable abortion access in our community. I have not personally been to this event, but I'm excited. One of our board members, Cam Kruger, is getting to be a judge. So, Kathy, have you been to this one? Have you gotten to taste the hot dishes, and will you be there?
Yeah, I've been to it a handful of years. I'll be there again. And yes, you taste many hot dishes. It's an opportunity to mix so many different flavors on one plate. I don't know if that happens anywhere in Duluth where you get that many different flavors, from bland Midwestern offerings to international offerings to queered up freestyle offerings.
Yes. I love it. Oh my gosh. So go. I believe they're asking for a $20 suggested donation at the door or more, going towards equitable abortion access. And then, Kathy, I know we had talked about mentioning December 1st. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, December 1st is World AIDS Day. You know, important this particular year because of the funding that's been pulled from international to, state level HIV/AIDS efforts. Also important because there's still a lot of people out there who are HIV positive, and because we've managed to improve medications. There's way more HIV positive people than ever because they're living long, high quality life lives. And at the same time, there's still a lot of people who don't know their HIV status, and that falls across all identities, but disproportionately, as always, for our American Indian and Black communities. So, if you're interested in noting that in some way, Harm Reduction Sisters is likely to do a very impromptu sign holding session outside of the Damiano Center around noon on December 1st, weather allowing, and then possibly also being down at the corner of Lake and Superior during drive time. So probably 4 to 5, just being out there holding signs, catching people's eyes so they do know that paying attention to HIV/AIDS is still important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really just bringing visibility to that ongoing fight and battle. And yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned again all of the funding cuts. And yeah, so I would love to see folks coming out to show support for that. Thanks so much for sharing. And I know you mentioned Harm Reduction Sisters. And so I love how this conversation is just flowing very easily into kind of how we talked about it. So moving into our deeper conversation with you here, Kathy, I would love to hear more about how you got involved with the work that you do in our community. I know you've been doing it for many, many years across communities. And you, I think, are one of the most, I would say, one of the most well-known community advocates here in the Northland. That many, many folks know and love you. And so I'm just really curious if you could share, like, how did you get into doing this work? And yeah, what's the story there?
Well, thanks, Sean, for that high compliment. I actually got started in community work when I stopped playing softball and volleyball and drinking beer And that coincided with me moving up to Duluth from the St. Cloud area. And really, the first things I got involved in were environmental initiatives. And I was jumping on all kinds of bandwagons, getting involved with the Audubon Society and the Sierra Club and a group called Trash Busters, where really I was able to learn a lot, really cut my teeth on learning about activism, working with a lot of other people who were really idealistic and enthusiastic about recycling, essentially. And then from there, I became a high school teacher and was pretty naive about how young people might be seen and um, regarded if they were different in a few ways, including gender identity and sexual identity. And so became involved with the Gay Straight Alliance, kind of as a supporter on the side. Um, and so focused from environmental to more human rights issues. Um, Upon shifting from teaching to doing youth work with Lutheran Social Service, I was then facilitating a program called Together for Youth that focused on queer, two-spirit, and intersex young people. And during that time, became more aware of other organizations in the community and just through a lot of collaborative uh, actions, getting uh, I'll say, caught up in a number of different circles of people, but always kind of staying centered on queer identity for kids and for adults too. And now I work in harm reduction, but now I understand that I always did work in harm reduction.
Oh,
Just didn't see it that way.
that's right. Oh man. Yeah, because would you say, I mean, community building, providing safe spaces, all of that is harm reduction?
Indeed, it is. Yes, yes.
Dang, I love that. And I feel like that's even a term that most folks aren't, maybe super familiar with what that means or what that looks like. And so, yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about what it is that y'all do at Harm Reduction Sisters, and maybe tied into that, like how can other folks also maybe get involved or support the work y'all do?
Okay. Well, so Harm Reduction Sisters specifically takes a public health approach to addressing the overdose epidemic and the corollary HIV and syphilis recent outbreaks we had in this area. And then there's a broad array of other service lines that we offer. Harm reduction generally is a practice, again, a public health practice that's focused on hearing people out, showing them love, especially showing them love in terms of offering basic human needs to them. It involves allowing the folks we're helping define what kind of help they need, and we fill in the gaps as best we can. Harm reduction practitioners will recognize that um, the traumas associated with misogyny and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and poverty and all the other aligned social conditions are hard for people to struggle through. And if it's been your lot in life to get locked up in some of those cycles, it may be quite reasonable to use substances to get from one day to the next. And so, although we may include efforts toward abstinence, we would not have that as an expectation for everybody by any means. So it's letting people define what it is they want to change, little change to big change, helping out as best we can, not judging along the way, offering up a lot of love on the side. and just being with them in the moments that we're standing there in person, and maybe 10 years down the road when they're still alive and they've been able to pursue, they were able to develop hope, and were able to pursue some plans for themselves. So just kind of
Mm.
a patient, long running practice of hearing people and responding the best that we can, um, given the overall social situations. And it's in a particularly hard time right now with the government um, doings.
Yep, I was thinking that same thing, because I know historically, like for example, numbers in the LGBT plus community, rates of addiction and things like that are higher because, yeah, you're trying to survive living a life in a world not set up for you, maybe in a family who doesn't support you or has kicked you out. And yeah, as I'm hearing you share about this work, I'm just thinking again, like taking care of our people, whether they have addictions or whether, you know, they need to get health care or they don't have a supportive family. I mean, all of these things take time to build trust and to build safety and relationships with people. And I think so often in our society, we just want to slap a band-aid on that person and send them on. And, there's not sort of the compassion, I think, and patience maybe to like walk alongside folks as y'all do with Harm Reduction Sisters.
Yeah, and you having mentioned uh, being being patient about it, developing relationship, having trust form. Um, One of the main things we do here is we have a syringe services program, and we give out sterile supplies for use of a variety of substances. But we also give out snacks and hot hands and mittens and information about other programming in the area that people could plug into. And the people who work in our syringe services room, they're the relationship experts. They probably wouldn't describe themselves that way, but because they do front with love, and they do offer something if we don't happen to have what an individual is asking for, they figure out something to offer, whether it's just chatting for a few more extra minutes or um, like some really good candy or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's really a fundamental pillar of harm reduction, is that relationship development. And I'll toss in that we do um, offer some supplies that are can be useful for hormone replacement therapy. So um, I'm not gonna suggest that we've got the full meal deal for people who might want to come to us for free supplies, but we got some of the stuff, and we're trying to figure out how to um, get enough supplies that we could offer people pretty much everything they'd need for um, healthcare purposes in that way.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome and super good to know. I mean, because right now, with all of the different changes happening with hospitals and insurances and pressure from the feds, there was recently just a decision, I think this week earlier, that the Catholic Church is like no longer allowing gender affirming care at Catholic hospitals. And so folks are, scrambling to try to figure out what this all means and how these things will impact their individual lives, myself included. And so, when I think about y'all's team and just the way that you're showing up in community, it's like, oh, you are creating more safe spaces, right? Like you are bringing compassion where it feels like in so many ways as a society we've sort of lost touch with compassion and empathy. And these are folks who are our family members and neighbors and community members. And I'm just really grateful for what y'all are doing and offering in the community. And so if folks like are hearing this and they're interested in like getting involved with harm reduction work, or maybe directly with y'all's organization, what are some ways that they can help out?
Well, I'll offer three things. First of all, I'll just say normalize harm reduction. So if you get in conversations with people and they're stigmatizing the practice of harm reduction, um, talk them away from that little spot in their mind. Um, a lot of times we are accused of enabling substance use and enabling an increase in crime. Um, and we've developed a response, usually centering around, well, we're enabling public health and survivorship, into another day where different choices could potentially be made. So yeah, we're not going to see you do that good work for us, but if you have those situations arise where someone's complaining about harm reduction programming like ours or Rural AIDS Action Network or any of the others around the state, um, yeah, put in a good word for us. Normalize harm reduction. Try to tap off some of that stigma that's attached to it. There's been some recent articles published about how harm reduction workers are starting to step away from the work in greater numbers because of the kind of secondary stigma that influences them doing that work. And then I'd say, uh, second, if you want to come join us and be in our company, we're kind of a motley crew of chuckleheads. We have supplies packing parties. We make kits out of supplies every other Thursday. So check our Facebook page to see when the next one of those is coming up. Generally, they're at I think believe 3 to 5 on a Thursday, every other Thursday, and then third, I'd say either donations of hygiene supplies. We give out a lot of hygiene kits, donations of menstrual products, donations of, especially during the cold part of the year, hot hands, uh, hats, mittens. I'm going to plug Carolyn Olson, area artist who provides a slow and steady supply of great fleece mittens she makes and some hats all winter long. She makes dozens of them over the course of the winter. And then cash. We know how to spend cash. We know how to hustle for free stuff and make do with what we've got. But um, if you've got some extra cash and you want to send it in our direction, we'll spend it well.
Heck yeah. And Meg, you beat me to it. So I'm just popping up Meg's comment here with that is their direct website for Harm Reduction Sisters. And we'll definitely include some of these details in the notes, afterwards, that you can scroll down and see.
Thanks, Meg. And it
Yes.
is Give to the Max Day today. No, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. That's right.
And we're hustling that. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many nonprofits are having to hustle for that, and it always falls on Trans Day of Remembrance for us, it seems like. So it's like, well, we're not hustling that day. So if folks want to donate yesterday or today, that's great. But Harm Reduction Sisters, definitely go and donate tomorrow on Give to the Max Day. And so, okay, I'm gonna kind of mix up a little bit of this question. So our next question, I would love for you to share, Kathy, more about how you've organized in the past for Trans Day of Remembrance. But before we get there, could you just share a little bit more about? I mean, gosh, was I reading 10 years that you were the director, the program director for Together for Youth, and I know so many folks have been just so positively impacted by that program. It's really been the only LGBTQIA2S plus youth programming in the Northland. until very recently, Transforming Families Minnesota now. They're based in the cities, but they are bringing some of their youth groups and starting a chapter up here. But I'd love to hear anything you'd like to share about your time at Together for Youth, or maybe what you learned from the youth over the years, or what you taught them. I don't know, anything.
Well, I'll call out my predecessor, Shirley Duke, who facilitated that group for, I believe, 14 years, from the mid 90s till around 2010, I believe. And so Shirley shepherded those young people through a time before there were gay straight alliances, for sure. Um, I don't know when MySpace happened, but probably that was pre MySpace. So
Probably.
there wasn't, social media for kids to do quick communications. Um, and I think parental support, or the perception of lack of parental support, was really, it was very, very strong at that time. And so young people were looking for any outlet to um, be themselves, because whether true or not, they believed they could not be themselves at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more young people who can be themselves at home, and it's just fine. So here's to that improvement over time. Um, and so Shirley, really worked with that group at a time where creating space like that was brand new. And I know that they were in a couple of different locations. Ultimately, ended up at Gloria Day Lutheran Church for lots of years, actually till the church fire happened there. And very early on, got shifted from a community group to Lutheran Social Service as the umbrella organization. There was another individual who handled the group for about a year before I came on board, but I started probably around 2010. And so it was a time when there were student groups at schools. It was a time when social media was becoming um, uh, a normalized part of everybody's day, especially young people. And so I think um, something that I had to learn to navigate was the power of social media, um, away from interpersonal group gatherings, the positive ways that people could stay connected in between being together in person, but also the negative ways that spats and bullying and other things that would happen online would often get brought into the group. They'd often get brought into schools on Mondays when kids were at each other over the weekend. It would come into our group on Wednesdays when we had our group meetings. So learning to try to navigate that for someone who was a melder at the time and not a social media native by any means, that was tricky. And also the dangers, you're 6 clicks away from, somebody who could potentially exploit you. And we certainly had young people get caught up in that. And the challenge of trying to communicate to young people that online relationships, as powerfully affirming as they may seem, and positively emotion based as they may seem, often do not end well. And that's a hard thing to communicate, and it's a hard thing to pick up the pieces when a young person realizes they were not communicating with a 19-year-old, it was a 40-year-old in Kentucky, and all those, yeah, those kinds of things would happen. I think seeing young people during the time I worked with Together for Youth, um, find ways to use their online and not online creativity to communicate about themselves was it taught me a lot, and it was great to see them develop ways to features probably not the right word, but to put themselves out in the world, like through zine creation. That was something that was done through Together for Youth. Video creation, um, uh, uh, clothing and makeup supports with each other, just kind of seeing kids live into that, share it, and have it get queered up even more when the recipe that one kid used got picked up by somebody else, and then there's a whole new higher level of personal presentation for them to put out there in the world. Um, and I'd say a big learning from young people, and I guess I have to admit, I heard the same thing from young adults as well. When we would ask teenagers, young adults, what is it that you want? Um, and they really wanted a safe space that wasn't necessarily curated or organized or planned in the way that Together for Youth was as a weekly meeting. They just wanted a space to go to and not have to have a meeting and not have to share whatever you were supposed to share that week, but to go have something to eat, get on a computer, play some music, and know that place will be there over the long run for them to go to. And we certainly talked about that kind of a space and trying to create it through Lutheran Social Services Duluth programming, but that never came to pass. But I've heard that Virginia has a youth group. It's not Lutheran Social Service umbrella. Some other organization has that covered, but they now have a space. I think the queer space maybe is the name of it, but it's just kind of a drop-in space. Not an expectation to have to sit through a meeting type of thing, but just come hang out. And Rose Adams is the person who's continuing to facilitate that group. She's done it for several years.
Oh man, that's awesome. I'm making a note of that right now so I can try to reach out and get some info so we can hopefully connect more folks, more youth up there to that space, which sounds really, really amazing. And it's funny, I literally was just sharing on our Trans Northland social media yesterday about a third space. Have you heard that term, Kathy?
I have heard of it, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so I recently kind of learned about that phrase too, and it's kind of exactly what you just described, that those young people were asking for, was like a space where they can show up and have some water and snacks and coffee, or play music or color or do whatever it is they want to do, but they can just go to that place. And that is sort of what we've been trying to build with our we've been calling it the tea room, and every Tuesday and Thursday mornings from 9 to noon we meet at the Imaginarium, which is right across from Lifehouse. And yeah, there's no plan, there's no programming, it's just show up, chat with people if you want, or go sit over on the couches and read a book, or yeah, those safe spaces are just so important, I think, especially now as our the climate around us, our communities are facing more and more I don't know, just fear and discrimination and violence. So that's so interesting. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about the history, because it's like that's a lot of that stuff I don't even know. And I think our history is so important for those of us, myself and younger, because we can, I think, learn through this. Like, we don't have to create something new. It's already been created by folks in the past and by our elders. And yeah, and I just want to say thank you. And just share a lot of gratitude, because the number of people that I have sent to Together for Youth over the years, that it's a huge, huge number. So I know that ripple effects of that work are continuing to spread throughout the Northland. They do have a new program coordinator, and that person has been really excited to plan more events and kind of try to get the youth out more. And so it's just really cool to see the new iterations of things as things shift, you know. And so let me pop this next one up here. So, you know, this kind of goes hand in hand with, you know, your work with Together for Youth. Maybe you'll clarify this. But I'm very curious, you know, many folks know that it has been you who have been, you know, organizing and showing up every year for Trans Day of Remembrance and setting up the pictures of our lost trans and gender expansive relatives and the candles and really, you know, foundationally holding that space and that event. And so, yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe when you started that, or how did it come to be, and what does it mean for you now?
So I'm going to look back to before I became involved and acknowledged the people who did hold space on that corner before I was involved with Together for Youth. I don't know how long it had been happening. I'm not sure if it was formally organized, if it was congregationally organized, if it was just a quick collaborative effort amongst people who felt it was important to note trans lives and trans lives lost. But I can remember just driving through downtown Duluth on a day when there were people out there holding up signs that said it was Trans Day of Remembrance, which was not on my radar. I can remember Gary Anderson as one recognizable person, which makes me think it's a possibility that the Northland Gay Men's Center, which had they had a subgroup called the Arrowhead Transgender Group, that it possibly could have been them who had been out there, I'll say pre-2010 probably. I actually saw them 2 years in a row where I just drove by, and I'm just thinking, those are brave people, and it's important to be there. I should probably be there. And and then when I started working with Together for Youth, the precursor to Trans Northland, the Lake Superior Transgender Group, had formed right around that same time with Natalie Crowley and Shelby James kind of holding things together. And it was the Lake Superior Transgender Group that wanted to start recognizing Trans Day of Remembrance. And I had been working closely with them on some other things. And so I had offered at that time to help with the gathering at Lake and Superior. It was really clear that they wanted to center an outside vigil-like presence so that the public, who was probably ignorant of Trans Day of Remembrance, would at least have that flash through their mind as they drove through that corner on their way home from work on that particular day. And I can't remember if the first year it was just the vigil, but I do know that most of the time when Lake Superior Transgender Groups was working on the Day of Remembrance, they also had an indoor component. And I remember it being at a handful of different churches. I remember being up at UMD once, and maybe some other non-congregational location. Sometimes it was just kind of a decompressed gathering after having been out on the street corner for those who were there. And other times it involved a light meal and just gathering before going out to the street corner. And so at some point early on there, I had volunteered to like pull some stuff together for visuals for the street side presence, and have just kept it up. So this is probably, I don't know, 12th, 13th year of doing it.
Wow.
I actually might be able to arrive at that. I have never, ever thrown away the pictures that I use from year to year. I just tape the new ones on top of all the old ones. And it's a pretty thick bunch of pieces of paper. So
yeah,
I could be curious and peel those back and see what year is the very, very first one that's on there.
mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
then carrying on once Trans Northland was doing that event, and I think almost always or always having that street side element as well as the indoor elements.
Yeah, definitely ideal to have an indoor event as well. And we're sorry, folks. We just did not have capacity to also plan that this year. We have done that in the past. And it's interesting, yeah, because there's so many, man, just thinking about, 10-ish, 11, 12 years ago when you started this, and there were these gatherings at the affirming churches, and now we're sort of seeing this resurgence of the welcoming and affirming congregations, at least in the Northland area. And a lot of those folks have said, come and use our space. And we want to offer this up and support the trans community in these ways. And also, it's a tricky thing, I think, for a lot of us folks to walk into churches or religious sort of places just based on trauma and things we've experienced. And so but those folks, it's just such a good reminder for me that those folks, welcoming and affirming congregation folks, but like allies at large, have always been with us, have always been, working alongside with us and supporting folks. And gosh, we need you more than ever now. So if you are that ally, I would encourage you to show up to this vigil tomorrow. As we mentioned at the top of the show, like, this is a hard one for a lot of folks in our community. I mean, having to consider and look at the faces and see the names of community members who are not much different than me or you, Kathy, who have lost their lives. And it is exactly as you said, very important to pause and to honor those people and their loved ones left behind. And I think remember what this really comes down to. It's, we can say all the sort of buzzwords about inclusive and safe spaces, but really it's trying to save our people from being murdered and harmed and violently attacked in so many different places, especially our trans folks of color and Indigenous two-spirit individuals in our communities. And so, yeah, I don't know, allies, this is a good one for you to come to, because oftentimes, some of us trans folks don't necessarily want to come out to a vigil, but it means a lot to see people showing up at this one. So just a reminder, it's at 4 p.m. starting tomorrow, corner of Lake Avenue and Superior Street. And so, Kathy, what, now after doing this for so many years and thinking about this current moment we're in U.S. history, at least, what does TDOR mean to you? Has it sort of stayed the same thing? Have things fluctuated, or have you considered not doing this vigil, or like, would you ever quit doing it? Or what do you think?
As long as I can totter around, I would likely go stand on that corner on Trans Day of Remembrance, whether it's just a couple of us or there's 100 of us. From the very beginning to now, I think it's so important to fight erasure, even though this is a gathering of people to recognize those lost to the ultimate erasure of violence and suicide, which is just slow erasure through social and familial pressure. Complacency comes so easily. And so if you're not, you're not picking in visual cues or audio cues that there's this normal humanity who truly is important to our communal existence, who are important to other people, who are important to our young people coming up, just to show out visually, show out verbally, if that's the way a vigil is going to shape out. But it's so important to get into the hearts and minds of people, even if it's for a matter of seconds. Seeing a collection of people publicly grieving, frankly, because of valued losses of other human beings. So I think that would motivate me forever. I would say that part of getting older is that grief and loss compounds. You're that's just a function of being on the planet longer. And I think most of us are pretty good at deferred grief. I know I certainly am, being busy all the time, not honoring a few moments to let your heart feel it, because you got to get to work, or you got some deadline coming up, or you got to get the dog out, or all those things that we can distract ourselves with, and not let the grief course its way, where it ought to land in our hearts for a while. So I think I carry that a bit more heavily. More recently, and I think I don't know. I just have the young people in mind. So I think, especially at this time, this political time, being out in whatever way, whether it's Trans Day of Remembrance or Trans Day of Visibility, just being out there in the community, even if it's temporal, it's a short period of time, just being out there is so important for our youth as well.
Well said, Kathy. Yeah. And actually, I just heard a stat yesterday from this queer news podcast I listened to, and they were sharing the information from the Trevor Project, but the data is from the 2024 U.S. Trans Survey that they just did, and they're starting to release some data now and numbers from that. And the stat they said was over 50% of youth coming up identify in some way as LGBTQIA2S+. And I was like, over 50%. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, the more safe we make our communities, the more safe our young people are feeling to identify and really explore, deeper into themselves and who they are, in their fullness. And so,
and queerness is natural, so let it roll.
That's right. As I recently learned on a queer potty hike. Yeah, queer is everywhere. We are everywhere. So yeah, thank you for that, Kathy. And I know that we're kind of coming up on our time here. We'll have to start wrapping things up. But as you think about this moment, all of the work and the years that you've put into the community that we're building here in the Northland, how are you taking care of yourself, and what might you suggest to other folks right now? Because I think, like you said, it's really easy to stay busy or to isolate, or use sort of these coping skills that may not feel the best for our folks who are out there. And so I'm just really curious what you would say about healing and self-care and all of that.
Um, well, I think one of the things I've done relatively recently is uh, trimmed a significant part of the news cycle out of what I take in. Um, listen to music programming instead of news programming part of the day. Um, I watch more cat videos and dog videos and goat videos than I have been in the last couple of years. Um, um, I guess I'll call back to where we started, where I talked about being gender oblivious and wandering around in my yard. So just being an elder fin queer, being outside as much as possible, gardening really um, has been important mental health care for me over lots of years. But just being outside, just getting away from screen stimulations and um, artificial lighting, and seeing what's going on out there in the trees and on the trails, and being able to like hopefully turn off all the other inputs. So I hope that for everybody that you find ways to turn off the noise, uh, um, find goofy, safe, affirming people to hang around with, um, and um, you know, find find yourself in books and music and movies, because now there are positive representations of that for us, and that wasn't so true. So, like, yeah, curate your own little life affirming resource library that you can turn to, because yeah, representation um, is so important. And especially if you're in a rural area, you gotta find some representation outside of your little community sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Oh, those are good ones. Goat videos, being goofy, being in nature. I love that. And I think it's just a really great reminder for myself, too, to flip the phone over and just like release that sort of chain that is, I don't know, that I feel tied to oftentimes to those screens. But just, yeah, being with our people and connecting to nature, I think can have such a huge positive impact on us, physically as well as mentally and emotionally. So yeah, I just really appreciate those reminders, and hope that you who are watching, are developing some of your own ways to take care of yourself and take care of your people, because we need every single one of you um, to keep going with us here. So, oh my gosh, we've got 2 minutes. Holy crap. Kathy, thank you. Thank you so much for becoming emotional after this conversation, because I have so much gratitude for the ways that you show up. And the way some of us young folks, maybe misstepped our way into learning how to do community organizing the way that you do. And so I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, for being someone I can look to, and many, 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 many people can look to in a community. So thanks for being awesome, Kathy, and for coming
Right,
on.
come on.
Yes, it has been so fun. I don't know if you can tell, but I really love these live conversations with these amazing folks in our community. So, speaking of, I gotta give you a little teaser. So I'm excited to share our next official guest star will be, drumroll, that was a bad drumroll, Dr. Tara Richter. So Dr. Richter is a licensed clinical psychologist who has worked extensively with the LGBTQIA2S plus community here in the Northland for many, many years. And she practices gender and identity affirming care She also recently opened up her own private practice called Richter Scales Psychological Services. And as we're coming into, the holiday season, times get tough for those of us in our community, and having to potentially be with community and family and neighbors and people who aren't always affirming. And so we'll have a conversation with Tara about just more ways we can take care of ourselves during the holidays and get us to the new year and keep on keeping on. So stay tuned for that 2 weeks from today. Just a reminder, if you're looking for plans this weekend or tomorrow, details for TDOR, you can check out our events calendar at transnorthland.org/connection. And you're watching with us, there's a couple of you. Thank you so much. And if you're watching this after the fact, we really, really appreciate you tuning in and connecting with us here at Trans Northland. So until we meet again, we hope you take real good care, everybody.